Welcome in, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We are going to get started in just a minute. And just as a heads up, we are recording this webinar. So if you don't want to be in the recording, please feel free to keep your camera off. And otherwise, really either way works. All right, and it looks like everyone's in, so we are going to get started. Thank you all again for being here. My name is Sabrina White. I am the Programs Director of Water Education Colorado. Hopefully all of you know a bit about WECO, but we are a nonprofit that's focused on raising the awareness of water issues and supporting different actions from partner organizations around the state. We are partnering with the Colorado Water Conservation Board today to talk about some exciting opportunities for educators in the water plan, and are going to get into that right now. So I will pass it over to my coworker, Kaylin Andrews, to talk about the Water Educator Network, and then we'll jump in.
Hi, my name is Kaylin Andrews, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator with WECO. So the Water Educator Network supports and connects educators throughout the state, that teach both formally and non-formally about water education. And so we have a Google group, which I'll drop the link for, and you can connect with us on the WEN website. And we have webinars and workshops that help connect and educate you all. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, Kaylin. Russ is now going to introduce his team and himself and get into the content of the webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having us, and thanks for attending today. Russ Sands, I'm Section Chief for the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and our section in water supply planning does a ton of work, including maintaining the water plan. So I'm going to focus on that today, but I've got some of our crew with us from my team and larger CWCB team. So if you do one click, I think our names will pop up. Elizabeth, thank you. So you'll hear from me a little bit, just kind of broadly on the water plan. We'll talk about water plan grants with Jackie, and then Ben is going to talk about the Water Supply Reserve Fund. And then Elizabeth will talk a little bit about some of our PEPO grants, and hopefully we'll kind of wrap it all together. But I think this is really aimed at, how you can kind of think about the water plan as a tool to leverage in your education and outreach efforts, and also, use that really as a tool for potential grant making to apply for funds that we can help you kind of fulfill the vision and mission of the water plan. So maybe a quick background. The Water Conservation Board, we've been around for a while now, and we're only about 65 people, but we do a vast array of work. So everything from interstate compact issues to stream and lake protection to flood mitigation, to a ton of grant management across. In fact, many of us kind of end up being project managers, despite what our day jobs might be. And so we've added a little bit of firepower in that area to have some additional assistance there. So Jackie on our team, for example, is one of our new regional managers that's really helping with grant making around water plan grants. We do a ton of work, and we're really a policy kind of oriented agency. We don't build projects like other states that maybe have more direct role in project building. We do a lot of project funding, but really rely on our local partners to build projects. And while traditionally you may think of building a project as a concrete and rebar exercise, it can certainly be that if we're thinking about a reservoir, but it could also be education effort or regional education effort, or it could be a water conservation campaign, for example. So there's many types of things that we fund, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The original water plan, some of you may be familiar, came out in 2015. As we were really updating this new plan, it was trying to identify how we pay homage to it being a living document, where we think about what worked well from the past and how we make it increasingly clear. And so one of the areas that you'll hear me focus on a lot today is how we recognize that the water plan, maybe for general public or especially for our NGO communities and other groups of educators, really use it as a bit of a wayfinding to apply for grants. So we've kind of had that in mind as we did this update. Next slide. This probably looks like a sea of boring documents to you, but it's a long way of just kind of showing that the work that's led up to the water plan has been, really started. I would put things back to 2002. Many of you will probably remember the 2002-03 drought and the Hayman fire, which at the time was the largest fire in Colorado. And of course, now we've had several fires burning, in fact, in the same year that really dwarfed and eclipsed the size of the Hayman fire. But, at that time, this cycle of drought, fire, flood that we're now so familiar with was really kind of a burgeoning idea. And the 2002 drought caught the attention of probably everyone in Colorado, some outside of Colorado who heard the state might be on fire. But it also caught the attention of our legislature. So a lot of the directives we have and the work that we're doing is really a direct result of that. So some of the local stakeholder groups that were legislatively mandated to kind of help direct manage support are the Basin roundtables that came out of some of that legislation that really born out of the 2002 drought. But in 2005, some of the planning in terms of our future forecasting of how much water we're going to have in the state was really born out of that. And so that process has really just kind of snowballed. And if you do one click, Elizabeth, I'll just focus on these last three documents, which are really the pieces that lead up into the water plan. So we come to think of the water plan as not one thing, but a suite of things that really are inclusive of about a 7-year update process. So the first of those pieces being the analysis and technical update to the water plan. That's the underlying data that really underpins the water plan. And it tells us things like we could have up to a 740,000 acre foot municipal gap every year by 2050. So it puts importance on understanding what our challenges are, but also what some of those solution sets are, like understanding how water conservation could reduce that gap by maybe 300,000 acre feet. And as we all know, getting people, behavior change, getting people to embrace water conservation often has a through line with education and outreach. So very critical part of the work that you're doing. So as we were updating the water plan, we thought a lot about, well, what is it? And again, going back to 2015, what are the critical elements? And we clearly see it as an opportunity to set the stage for collaboration, to talk about partnerships, and to shine a light on the critical issues of, water challenges and opportunities we have in the state. On a really simple level, it operates as a strategy document for our agency, for the CWCB. And with that, we had to really frame out, well, what are the things within our control to directly influence and kind of, on some level, rein back in some of the broader reaching things that might have been in the first plan that we kind of realized we can't actually affect a change in or be called on to track because we may not be able to influence it. At the same time, we're not overly constrained as an agency because we do so much through partnerships. And so speaking to that, we really took this 50-50 approach, next slide, in the water plan that kind of acknowledges both those partnerships and then what we can do. So there are 50 partner actions that are called out in the plan. Those are really the things that you can do. And you is a pretty broad bucket, I would say. And so we've kind of put some delineation in there, and you'll hear me speak more about that in a minute of what that means. So it could be, I think, a lot of different scales. So it could be, local government or, higher elected officials. It could be, NGOs, or it could be, just the average day resident in a community and what they could do. The partner or the agency actions are the things that we are going to do as an agency. And we definitely went out of our way to really work with our partner agencies at the state. Of course, there are many, and some subset of those work more directly on water. So you probably are familiar with groups like Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or Colorado Department of Ag, or Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And so some of those actions, they said that they would actually help us complete. And so you'll see in the water plan kind of that delineation of who's leading and who's supporting. But if you do one click, Elizabeth, thank you so much. These partner actions are really framed up around and have a direct wayfinding or through line with the 5 areas of water plan grant funding. And in the 2015 plan, we didn't have water plan grants. So that actually came as a result of the original water plan. And in 2017, the legislature gave us these categories and water plan grants. And so these are kind of the pieces that we have to follow. They're somewhat explicit in legislation of what we can and can't fund. And often it's the connection across these. So you're going to hear some of our other staff speak to those in a minute. So it's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but just to know when you're thinking about the water plan, it really tracks back to what we could fund. In the water plan, there are these 4 areas, and of course, these are really interconnected areas. But for practical purposes, just to organize the plan, we broke them down into 4 areas. So our vibrant communities are everything municipal water use, and our, everything from our biggest cities down to our smallest communities. Robust agriculture, thinking about food, fiber, our Seki communities in the Rio Grande Valley, everything, farm, ranch, everything that it takes to grow food in Colorado. Thriving watersheds is our area that we talk about environment and recreation, and also significant focus on forest health and watershed health and aquatic species. And then the last area, resilient planning, is really more of an explicit call out than we had probably in the first water plan to acknowledge that we have climate challenges, but that understanding the ways climate change may impact us are just a piece of the puzzle. We really need people to be engaged in the solution sets. And so it really has a strong through line with education, because we need to kind of bring people in, help them understand the challenges, but then also kind of arm them with what they can do about it. And when we think about that, there's a very clear through line with just being more inclusive and bringing everybody in. We recognize that we're really going to need everybody pulling the same direction to realize a stronger Colorado in the future. So these kind of concepts of education, climate adaptation, inclusivity, and really how we can be supportive as government are in this kind of resilient planning section. Next slide. So the water plan is kind of framed up around 4 action areas. Those action areas we just talked about. There's a kind of a vision in each of those. And those visions tie directly back to kind of the values that are embedded in the water plan. And those values are really just the kind of core things that keep Colorado great. It's kind of protecting all of these 4 action areas. And so you'll see this kind of format where these are, our values drive us to act, where A is our action areas, they lead into these visions. So for example, the vision in vibrant communities is really framed up around recognizing that it's high time for all of our communities to really embrace water conservation. We know that a lot of communities don't have, you can go ahead and click forward, that's fine. We know a lot of our communities don't have, for example, comprehensive plans that maybe talk about water conservation or talk about land use. And really what we need to realize our best future is all communities kind of looking at the nexus between land use planning, water conservation, and alternative water supplies, or thinking, that could be stormwater, that could be rainwater, or it could be reuse water. So really that kind of one water concept, bringing all those things together is part of that vision. And so all these visions kind of paint the pathway of where we want to be in 2050, where we think we're going to realize our best future. And they're supported by all these tools. And so you'll see this kind of list of tools. And one of these is certainly education and outreach. And so these little icons are framed up in the water plan and kind of speak to, where in each action, one of these tools or a few of these tools may be called out more. So public outreach and education is really critical. Next slide. And again, this just the partner actions and agency actions kind of repeated there. So just kind of to briefly speak to it, I kind of covered this kind of vision for vibrant communities. And if you do one click, and we can drop a link in the chat in a minute, but if you go and look at Colorado Water Plan, you'll see on the website that there's actually a couple of handouts that you can look that just break out the partner actions or just break out the agency actions. And that may be a little bit easier kind of resource. It's certainly less beefy than the 240-page water plan itself. But in each of these areas, we talk about engagement and education. So in vibrant communities, again, thinking about these scales, we kind of look at that as what does that mean at the government scale? What does that mean if you're an NGO? Or what does it mean if you're at the resident scale? So again, a very clear focus on supporting water conservation efforts. And I think I saw one of my past friends from past life at a utility on here. Certainly the nexus between, again, things like stormwater and water conservation are going to be increasingly critical for us to embrace. So building education efforts around there, around these areas are going to be important. And for you, as you're thinking about maybe possible grants that you could apply for, again, the water plan serves as a little bit of a menu of saying, well, here's what I want to tie to. There's support for this in the water plan, and so I could apply for a grant in this area. Next slide. So we talked about robust agriculture. Vision here is really, trying to think about how we, ag always tells us that they have a target on their back, and I think that that's true in many ways. The go-to answer far too often is to take ag, purchase the land, and what they call buy and dry it up, use the water, and that is what's been happening in Colorado. It's something that the first water plan really puts a stake in the ground to say we need to try to avoid that. We need to think more collaboratively. We need to invest in things like, you may have heard of alternative transfer mechanisms, or collaborative water sharing agreements is kind of the new term for that. But could we work out agreements with agriculture that keep agriculture in production, that help maintain a robust agriculture in our state, which includes economy and jobs and ecosystem benefits, and all the great things that agriculture gives us, including local food, without completely having that go away, but also have some flexibility in really dry years to maybe lease that water for cities to be able to use more. And it could also be for farm to farm or other things, farm to environment, for example. So in this space, when we think about engagement and education, again, kind of thinking about those three scales, but leaning in on this, thinking about what are those pathways for supporting that kind of thinking around agriculture. Are there ways that we need to educate sometimes even our elected officials about the consequences of taking ag out of production? Or where are there ways that we can partner even in education and outreach mindset? There are many times we would post up a booth at a farmer's market. I mean, it's a great way to make tie-ins there. Next slide. Thriving watersheds, again, this is the space we talk about everything environment and recreation in our state. The original plan talked about kind of 80% of prioritized streams, but we realized that prioritization really happens when you are in the weeds of a planning effort. And certainly we've seen big fires change priorities in some cases overnight, where you may have to shift to a different area. So we focused here on really, this call to have 80% of the state kind of covered with some level of environmental planning, whether that is a stream management plan or integrated water management plan or a forest health plan, or quite often, multiple plans that are really trying to find synergies and really creating a shared stewardship of how we are going to collectively work together and fund investments in environment and recreation to protect our watersheds that are really the lifeblood of the state. So in this space, we talk about education engagement, again, at those three scales, but participation in citizen science efforts and local watershed planning. There's so much great work that you all do that are really, getting kids and community members out really at all levels and ages, to really connect them with where their water comes from, the proximity that they may be to a stream. In many cases, we see in the urban setting, sometimes people don't even know how close they are, or the connection again to stormwater and pollutants running back into our streams. So lots of good work to be done there. Next slide. And then this last one, resilient planning. And again, this is really, how do we educate people? And not, Brad Udall says you can't depress people into action, right? We can't just talk about, what it means if things get, 4.2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by 2050. That will have cascading consequences. But what can we do to mitigate those worst impacts? So in this space, one more click. Again, we talk about those three scales and really talk about, exploration of how we bring more community members into the discussion, how we think about being more resilient together. And there's many examples I'm sure you can all pull from of good work that you're probably doing in this space already. So maybe to hang out on this topic, and if you click the next slide, this I will speak to a little bit of our just agency action. So, and I'll call out maybe three here that I think are probably more aligned with the types of things that I would imagine a group like Water Educator Network would be excited about. But one click, Elizabeth. So action 4.1, these are again the things that CWCB will lead, but create a capacity building hub to provide accessible education opportunities. I think we are really, right now just in the planning phase of what should this even look like, but how can CWCB be a resource for putting educational materials in a one-stop shop? What types of materials are going to be most helpful? And I think what we've heard that really fueled the idea for this action was that often people are coming in at a level like a 101 type class that needs some general information. And there's probably many resources for that. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we could probably have at least some key things, especially the things that are stumbling blocks that we hear a lot about as we go across the state, of people just not being aware of what does it mean for a stream to, or a basin to be over appropriated. So we will probably be looking at how we can best serve that up, how, what that looks like, if it's something that comes with TUs, if it's something that is maybe more of just a printable online kind of certificate, and what would be most helpful to create pathways to getting people into water, whether those are BIPOC community or whether those are just really any high school student. We often have a deficit from people coming out of high school that are coming into the fields of water, whether that's engineering or education or anything else. So trying to make pathways there and provide tools, and maybe even some of that kind of next tier level learning of, okay, you want to start stream management plan, what does that look like? So we're thinking about that, but that's on the horizon. Create a collaborative Colorado Water Plan education and outreach campaign. There are many education and outreach campaigns, and Water Education Colorado certainly was a partner with us and worked on a Water 22 initiative last year. What can we do that's kind of branded to the water plan that CWCB has, a little bit more control of the messaging, some of the campaigns that are out there behind a firewall or paywall. We really want to have something that people can pick up and run with, and has some consistent messaging that we're comfortable with, that really reinforces the water plan. So first step here, we're going to be thinking about how we can get out and kind of understand in each basin what are the common messages that really resonate. What are other programs found messages that are hitting home, and where there may be some specific messages in each basin that need to be supported. So again, these are things that have a little bit of a long burn. The full context of the water plan is really looking out of the work we'll do over the next decade. But these are things I think we're already thinking about, how do we advance? And the last one I'll just kind of highlight, because I do think we have at least one project, but there's a action in the water plan to have one innovation challenge in each of the 4 areas of the water plan. And right now we're kind of focused on the agricultural piece of this, but have really understand that we are the ones that have to lead these initiatives, but we certainly can take on partnerships. And when we go into that from the beginning as willing partners and have a kind of a decisive say, this is a really great through line of where we are able to use grant making to kind of bring innovation. And so in this case, we're working with the Colorado Ag Water Alliance to think about how we can provide some seed money to honestly do a little bit of trial and error. What are the things that are really going to make the difference for agriculture? Where can we try some new practices and see if it works? And then where it's working, how can we scale those and get those out to the next level? So we're thinking about that. We're also thinking as a part of this as innovation accelerator and how we can work with the business community. So lots of good things, but I thought I would at least highlight those 3 things so you can also see how the agency and the state is really working to also kind of have that feedback loop to supporting you, because you certainly support us. And Elizabeth, do I have one more slide, or is that my last slide? Oh, I will just say, and I didn't really, you look at the water plan, I think it's pretty clear. I remember when we released it, one of the reporters asked me, well, you've kind of painting this dire picture of the future, but you're talking about hope. And I mean, that's just honest on both sides of that coin, right? Our future will be warmer. We know that has major impacts for all the sectors. It's tough, it's challenged, but there's a lot that we can do about it. So I love this quote that really speaks to this, that there is too much good news out there to justify despair. And I find hope in each of you, and really, really, truly appreciate the good work that you do with really educating the next generation of folks that are going to help us find and solve these solutions. So thanks to you all, and I will turn things over.
Jackie, are you able to hop on? Oh, I'm muted. Can you guys see me and hear me?
I can now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Russ, and hi everyone out there. Good morning. My name is Jackie Dallas. I'm the Regional Water Plan Grant Manager for the South Platte, North Platte, and Metro. It's really great to be here with you today. I'm going to be discussing the water plan grants with a focus for you as educators. Next slide, please. So the first question I'm sure you guys have is, are you eligible for a CWCB grant? So eligible applicants include government entities and private entities. So in your instance, you know, a teacher cannot apply to a direct water plan grant, directly to a water plan grant. But if you were to partner with a nonprofit, partnerships, or school district, and we really encourage those partnerships, you would be able to apply. Each grant has their own list of eligible projects, and right below that is the requirements for contracting with the state. Next slide, please. So the water plan grant program was established to make progress on the critical actions and measurable objectives identified in the water plan that Russ just explained to you. Most years we have an average of around 10 million in funding, and this year we have a little over 20 million available. So you'll see at the bottom of this slide a series of categories that Russ has already explained, and these are the 5 categories which the projects fall under for water plan grant funding. The one that we're going to be focusing on today is engagement and innovation. So most of your projects as educators is where this category is where you will fall. You'll also see that I have a bullet up there that says $300,000 or more. So in the next few slides, I'll be giving you examples of some projects we've awarded this past round and are just getting underway. But these projects examples I'll discuss are all grants under 100,000. And so we do have a good amount of funding this round, and I encourage applicants to make big asks for larger projects if they meet the water plan grant guidelines and criteria. A few more details about the water plan grants. A match is required for all plan grants. It's a 50% match for any construction project, or a 25% minimum match for studies. And matching funds can be a combination of cash match and in-kind match. These grants are highly competitive, and our most successful projects are with multiple benefits or purposes. And we have 2 rounds of applications every year, and the applications are due July 1st and December 1st. And at the end of my presentation, I'll place a link in the chat that has our guideline. Next slide, please. So I saw some people already talking about the River Science program. So this is the first example of a project. We awarded this in December 2023, and it's just getting started. It was a grant for $98,575, and it supports River Science. It sounds like you all know about them already. And this project will really build on the 30-year success of River Watch's water quality education statewide. And the project will incorporate water quality policy and planning concepts in workforce skill development. Next slide, please. The second project is the Thompson School District. It is the Cottonwood Plains Elementary School low water landscaping upgrade. They just received $41,500 to replace irrigated Kentucky bluegrass at the entrance of their school with native low water xeriscape landscaping. So it's not that this was just a landscaping project. The great thing about this project is the goals of this project will reduce the outdoor water demand for the school, but it also is serving as, you know, an outdoor educational classroom. So even though they're using contractors for the site preparation, students, parents, and staff will also be involved in the planning and hands-on learning. Next slide, please. The last project example I'm going to talk about is the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District. The Conservancy District received $36,000 in funding to continue this long-standing water festival for the next 3 years. It's a very successful water festival. It educates 400 students from 15 elementary schools across the 4 counties along the Lower South Platte. And 5th graders meet with 30 presenters that are all water and conservation professionals who facilitate activities and lessons for the whole day. Next slide, please. So Elizabeth put together this awesome map. I am not the only water plan grant manager. There are 4 of us in the different regions of Colorado. And if you're not sure what region you fall in, you can use this map to locate your water plan grant manager. And the next slide shows our contact information. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction. Next slide. Thank you guys so much. And as I said, reach out if you have any questions, and I'll hand it over to Ben to discuss the water supply reserve fund grants.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. Good morning to everybody. Yeah, so I manage the water supply reserve fund grant program here for the CWCB. And this is a pretty unique grant program in the sense that we work with our roundtables. And so the map that Elizabeth had put together, those are our 9 basins. And we have these roundtables are, if you're not familiar with these roundtables, are made up of stakeholders from municipalities and agricultural producers, you know, recreation, environmental groups. And so they all get together. They have formed what we call basin implementation plans, and they pick and choose projects that they would like to be implemented and funded through the water supply reserve fund. And so there's just one more layer to start with. And so, and usually what we see with these grants is projects that address the water supply issues. So a lot of planning, studies, a lot of construction grants. However, something that is not always utilized is activities that do promote education at the basin roundtable level or basin level, I should say. And so those are eligible projects that can be funded through this grant program. Our funding levels can vary annually, but we've not to go to too much in depth, but we feel that we have a solid plan that can help just kind of stabilize our funding situation over the next several years and continue to provide funding for some good projects there. And of course, projects or money to advance good education projects. I won't go too much into PEPO because that's what Elizabeth will talk about next. But I would say if this is a grant program that you, after hearing my couple minutes, after hearing me talk about it and you want to pursue this, it would be a good idea to talk to the PEPO, which is Public Education, Participation and Outreach. They're coordinators for all the different roundtables. And it'd be a good idea just to talk with them first and get their support and talk about your project with them first and foremost. And then, you know, you'll work through the roundtable to get their blessing, and then it'll come to CWCB for our review. So it's a little bit different than our other grant programs here at the state. The roundtables have their own application deadlines. CWCB has their own deadlines. Our deadlines are the first of every even month. And then depending on the dollar amount you're requesting, just kind of determines, when it's going to be up for approval by our board or our director. I do want to highlight just one project real quick, so I don't take too much time from Elizabeth here, but this was this grant from Yampatika, which is a nonprofit environmental educational group up in the northwestern part of the state. This was awarded just recently in our March board meeting, and they've actually come in. This is actually their second grant. They came in back in November of 2019 for a 2-year program. So these grants can go over multiple calendar years. And so this is basically, pre-K through 12. As you can see there on the bullet, in and out of school water education program. So it's not only, focusing on just K through 12 students, but also just the kind of community at whole and just educating them on basin specific water issues. And so this particular, the second grant that was awarded there is improving water education to our Spanish speaking communities, but then also the more rural remote areas as well. We do, this particular group does provide training to the teachers in water education. And because it's a multi-year, we're able to kind of evaluate just how effective that program can be, which is a nice just kind of metric for staff to see, how our education programs are, well, not ours, but the programs that we fund, how well they are doing. And so, there's other examples that we have going on. A lot of basins do have kind of a few different educational groups that come in through WSRF over the years. So it's always good to see, and it's good that there's a lot of interest in there. So look forward to working with those who want to pursue WSRF grants for education projects. And so, so like I said, I teed up PEPO, and I'll let Elizabeth go more into those grants. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ben. I'm Elizabeth Goder. I'm the Water Planning and Community Outreach Specialist with the Water Supply Planning section. And I will round us out on our last funding and grant stream that really, I would say, is the main one that focuses on education and outreach. And I just want to thank WECO for inviting us to speak to the WEN network, because I think, as you've heard, we have a lot of funding available, and we're just eager to reach out to more people and let them know about these opportunities, and hopefully get some really great projects to advance education and outreach initiatives across the state. So I will talk about what we call PEPO, and Ben kind of teed that up. So our public education participation and outreach, also known as PEPO grants. Historically, our basin roundtables each had a PEPO liaison or coordinator that got a small stipend from CWCB each year to carry out their work. And what we heard consistently was the need was much greater than the resources and the funding that they got. So we were able last year to bring PEPO under the WSRF umbrella and make it its own standalone grant program, and effectively quadruple the amount of funding that the basin liaisons or coordinators get each year to implement their work. So now PEPO is its own grant category, and it has two funding categories: the Basin Coordinator Fund, which was the normal basin-specific outreach and education efforts that really happen alongside those 9 basin roundtables that have been talked about. And then a brand new funding opportunity called Statewide Initiatives. And the mission of that is really to advance statewide education and outreach efforts that have a multi-basin scope. So for more specifically for the basin coordinator, this now awards up to $25,000 per year to each of those. We call them basin coordinators now. A lot of them work with a larger education committee within their basin roundtables, and they coordinate with us and with their basin roundtables to advance the goals of the water plan and those basin implementation plans, which are kind of the mini water plan for their basin specifically. A letter of support is needed for this grant program from the Basin Roundtable, so similar to WSRF. And each of these, besides the North Platte, currently have a basin coordinator, but I thought it was important to mention this funding stream because we do have some basins that award kind of like a subcontract or a sub amount of funding from their $25,000 scope to local nonprofits that work in education and outreach, that really do a lot of youth programming, that might put on water festivals, which I know is a good majority of the people in the WEN network. And so what I would suggest if you're interested in pursuing this type of funding would be to reach out to the local PEPO coordinator for the basin that you're in and just have a conversation about your needs and what they can support if your programming is really basin specific. And if you want to reach out to me first, I'm happy to put you in contact with that PEPO basin coordinator. The second category is called statewide initiatives, and these really fund any education and outreach activities that have a bigger statewide or multi-basin scope and benefit. So this is brand new, and we're excited to see applications come in through this category. Traditionally, there's about $75,000 per year available in this bucket, but due to a boost from severance tax windfall, which funds this funding, there's a lot more available this year and in coming years. So we are encouraging people to reach out with any ideas that they have that would have a multi-basin or a statewide education mission and scope. And of course, like most of our grant programs, we encourage these to be aligned with the goals of PEPO, the water plan, and CWCB. And you might ask, what are the goals of PEPO? So on the right hand side over here, you'll see our PEPO coordinators and greater work group meet a few times a year and have kind of brainstormed some ideas that would be high priority to fund and good examples just to give people a sense of what might be a competitive project and would align with PEPO goals. So some of those include and are kind of tied back to some of the agency and partner actions that Russ mentioned earlier, but scoping of the statewide messaging campaign, what types of messages and campaigns would really track well throughout the state and also with a local flavor for each of the basins. He talked a little bit about that capacity building educational hub, but just scoping for the field of opportunities of what that could look like, what topics would be really important for advancing career pathways for young professionals, and also included are just any videos or survey work that has more of a statewide water education focus. And something that we've heard a lot is there's definitely a need for our education and our outreach materials and collateral to be more accessible and translated into Spanish, but as smaller nonprofits or school districts, that's a big lift and a big financial commitment. So that would be a great project to be able to translate the different PEPO BASIN coordinators most used education and boothing materials into Spanish to just get the message out to all Coloradans. A full list of these initiatives can be found on the PEPO website. So on our website, and I'll go over this again, on cwcb.colorado.gov /funding, and that's in my next slide, the whole list of our grant programs that we went over today and their criteria and guidelines, and their deadlines, and more information can be found on our website. But just to summarize what we talked about today, because I know that was a lot to throw at everyone, our water plan grants directly tie back to the water plan funding categories. For the WEN network, we suggest the engagement and an innovation category that's most in line with education and outreach goals in the water plan. These grants can be broader than one basin, and those application deadlines are again July 1st and December 1st. For Water Supply Reserve Fund, which Ben covered, those application deadlines vary, so just check with your local basin roundtable for when you need to get on their agenda, when the CWCB deadline will be. And these grants really support the local basin implementation plan needs, and it requires the involvement working with the roundtable and getting approved by them. And then PEPO deadlines are June 1st and December 1st. So coming up with that June 1st one, the basin coordinator again supports local education and outreach needs in the basin. And then there's that statewide initiatives fund that has a bigger multi-basin statewide scope. So if you're not fully overwhelmed and you're excited to apply for a CWCB grant, this is a good checklist, and all of this can be found on our website. So I would suggest starting there, cwcb.colorado.gov /funding if you want to get straight to the grants and the funding page. Each of the grants have their own criteria and guidelines, and there's several pages, but they have all the information you could ever want and need. They're very detailed. They cover whether you're eligible, the requirements that Jackie mentioned at the beginning, what you'll need. As an individual, it's really hard to go in for a grant, but if you partner with a school district or a local nonprofit or another private organization, they will usually have those insurance documents and certificate of good standing from the state that you'll need to fully execute a contract with us. So I recommend reading over those grant criteria and guidelines, making sure that you're eligible and a good fit, and also considering who you could potentially partner with, whether that's a fiscal agent or a local nonprofit, to make sure that you're able to come in under the state rules for one of our grants. And then also listed on each of the grant pages is the correct staff contact. So Jackie and her other regional grant managers are great for, entry point for the water plan grants. For WSRF, they're different ones based on which category, but Ben is really a great person to reach out to. And then for PEPO, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone on this webinar, and we can help point you in the right direction. It's also great to reach out to a point of contact just to kind of have an initial conversation about your idea, we can help. There's a lot of education grants out there, so we can help point you in the right direction of which grant to pursue based off of your idea. And then something that is important is we do all of our grant applications through a portal. It requires you to register first, and it can take a couple days for that to go through. So don't wait until the last minute, the day before, the day of, to apply for your grant if you haven't registered for the grants portal yet. We also have a couple of how-to videos that walk you through how to apply through the portal. Those are also on each specific grant page on our website too. And that is it. I think we have a few minutes for questions, and I'm sure all of us are happy to answer anything that you might have. And I haven't been looking at the chat, but Sabrina, I will turn it back over to you.
Great, sounds good. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'll read out some of the questions. It looks like we haven't gotten an answer to yet, and then we'll open it up for questions, spoken. And just any of you feel free to hop in as as you can answer these. So from Sarah Johnson, we had how has the CWCB connected with the Colorado Department of Education, schools and teachers to integrate water education into the priorities in our education systems? And actually, as I say that, I think Russ, you addressed that in chat as well, but just to go over his answer, they or I guess Russ, if you want to speak to that quickly.
Sure, I'll just quickly paraphrase. I've been trying to keep up with the questions in the chat, and if I missed something, please let me know. But yeah, in general, I mean, one of the fun things about being a policy agency is you realize quickly how your power is really limited to the coalition of the willing. We can influence certainly through a document like the water plan, certainly with the connections to funding, but when it comes to partner agencies, there's really no mandate that anybody has to work with us. So we put out a pretty broad call, and we're grateful to have a lot of folks. Department of Ed was not one that really engaged with us a ton, but Water Education Colorado has been working with them, I think, and had some conversations around sweep and education efforts. So there's certainly a connection there, and we're happy to embrace. That said, CWCB, and we frequently are tapped for education efforts across the state, or supporting water festivals, been to several over the years. So we've always got our ear to the ground there. Some of this speaks to a little bit about our primary audience versus the audience that maybe you often deal with more. In many ways, at our agency level, and for frequently our grants that come through are funding organizations versus people. Can we fund a teacher? Yeah, if somebody has a business and they have a grant idea, that's possible. But in general, our primary audience that we target is really kind of more the entity kind of level, the organization level. Those are the audiences that are coming in for grants. So we're sometimes a little bit more removed from the boots on the ground. The water plan strikes an interesting balance because we're kind of balancing, and this gets to the partner action agency action split I discussed in detail, but we kind of recognize that we have that split, right? Our primary group that we deal with is not necessarily the world of people, and yet the water plan is really reaching out to the world of people and can serve as a supportive educational tool. So we really utilize groups like Water Education Colorado and other partners, Project WEN, many of you on the work that you're doing to kind of be those boots on the ground to kind of see a lot of that through. So certainly open to any other ways that we can coordinate with groups like Department of Education, but that may not necessarily be as reflected in our direct mission.
Thank you, Russ. And it does look like you've gotten all of the questions in chat. So I'll just open it up to anyone who wants to ask a question. Feel free to unmute yourself. All right, it looks like everyone got their questions into chat. Unless anyone wants to, sneak any last minute question in here. I think we are good. And thank you all so much for being here today. And let's give another round of thanks to the CWCB for talking about the water plan. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you all.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.